Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today we're continuing a series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and of course SRG320 has updated the core multiple times since our last video. Seems like he's on a roll with Sega Saturn development, and the best part is we get to play new games, as well as games that have vastly improved since the last time we took a look at them. So we're going to be going over all of the different games in his patch notes and taking a look at them in the video today. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But in the patch notes, the Proteus Deluxe pack here was mentioned because it used to be that only one of these games would work and there would be some graphical glitches. I think it's probably been like 3, 4, 5 months since we showed this. Now I'm going to show you the first Proteus game on the disc, and then later on in the video I will show you the second. But the great part is both of them are now working. The graphics seem to be spot on. The music is definitely quality, and it's everything you would want it to be. And these are awesome games as well. I actually own a physical copy of this disc. I've had it for a very long time, and Konami had an absolutely great sense of humor when they made these games, and the conversion over to Sega Saturn was near to perfect. And now with the updates on the current core, you're getting a much better implementation of one game, and the other game is finally working. At least the last I remembered, I tested this, you could only get this Proteus game to work, but the original on the disc would not function whatsoever, and that's because these are two different generations of games, which means the port to Sega Saturn probably utilized two different functions in some piece of hardware. And that is the thing I like to mention in videos. Between VDP1 and VDP2 and the two CPUs, there's a lot of different modes, functions, and calls you can hit the hardware with. So just because one game on a disc would work, that does not necessarily mean the other one would work, because they can be coded in completely different ways to take advantage of different aspects of the Sega Saturn hardware. But this is running absolutely spectacularly. This throws a lot of sprites and background layers on screen at once. The speed seems to be 100% there. All of these sprites and graphics are drawing correctly. The music sounds good. If there's anything wrong with the performance of this particular game, I cannot tell whatsoever. But again, if you see anything, leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite Proteus game is. I would be curious, because these games just have so much charm. They are so unique and so weird and colorful. You can't help but love them and be amused by them when you play. And having both games on this deluxe pack playable on the Sega Saturn core today is just another huge bonus. It's another game that's working, because SRG320 continually updates the core in January. It's very possible by the time you watch this video there could be another small update out, but of course I'll keep the videos coming so long as that happens. Another game mentioned on the GitHub patch notes that's definitely playable now is going to be Power Drift. There were some updates on how scaling and rotation could work on the core, because a lot of what the Sega Saturn could do in hardware would be 2D scaling and rotation. And if you've never seen Power Drift in action, this is just sprite scaling to the nth degree. This is an arcade port, and definitely this is a very unique Sega game. I can't say ultimately I love it though. It can be very hard to control. This was basically a technical showcase of just how hard Sega could scale and rotate a sprite, but on the gameplay side, it can be a little bit tricky to actually get a hang of. Tell me down below if you've ever played Power Drift and what you think of it though. It's basically Sega's Mario Kart without power-ups, and while it is a very interesting looking game and does have a lot of interesting techniques going on in hardware, this is a game that I feel like Sega really pushed the look of the game, but didn't really save all that much for the actual gameplay. Give me an Outrun any day of the week, or an Outrunners over Power Drift, but I know some people will probably be very excited to see this here, so tell me down below if you're one of them. And again, I'm not knocking the game, it's just one of those titles that I've always seen more as a visual showcase of what the hardware could do versus an actual fun game that you can sit down and play. But what it does in the scaling and rotation, it seems to be very close to original hardware here. Now this game throws so much at you at once, it's very possible that I'm missing a little bit of a glitch somewhere, but there's so much to see. It's a really difficult example to try to actually pick out what's not working. On the sound front, everything sounds good, if a little bit quiet, and on the control front, it's controlling exactly like Power Drift would on the Sega Saturn, which is it's going to take a lot of practice for you to get used to it. And you can go in, change all the options up, give yourself a better chance at doing better at this game. But I'm sure it's one of those things. This might be somebody's favorite game out there, and you may be very excited that it's now working within the core correctly. Because I think the last time we looked at this game, it had heavy graphical glitches because of the non-finished implementation of the sprite scaling and rotation. So it's another game if you want to pick up and play today. I can't see anything wrong with it other than the fact that it's just not a very great game as far as controls are concerned. Now let's move over to a shmup with Shinryu. This is a new working game, at least as far as my memory is concerned, and it does a very interesting thing with the Saturn hardware, because this was a tate or vertical shmup back in arcades, and the Sega Saturn implementation rotates the screen and somehow makes the video source interlace while doing it. It is an odd way to do things, but it now works in the core, and I'm sure it's down to some of that rotation effect being able to work. And I will say that this has seemingly perfect audio with a good volume level as well, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds and I'll be back with more games that just work better. Sounds really good. Those explosions may be a little bit crunchy, but that's how I remember them on real hardware as well. And hopefully there is some way to de-interlace games on the Sega Saturn Core in the future, because while this is an awesome shmup and it is a ton of fun, it's a very interesting way that developers decided to convert it over. Rotating it into tate mode on a horizontal screen somehow ended up with it being interlaced. It's not something I think I've ever seen done in a shmup before. If you can think of an example, leave me a comment down below, because I don't have a photographic memory of every shmup's video mode, but I really do feel like this is unique and not in a great way as far as the development of Sega Saturn games is concerned. It has nothing to do with the core. This is functioning exactly as it would on real hardware. It is going to run in that interlaced mode, which is just an odd thing, but honestly, if you just don't look too close, you might not notice them whatsoever. With YouTube compression, it may smooth out some of that interlacing even further than you would see on the original capture. But if you've never played this shmup before, it is an absolute blast, and it's another game that is now working on the Sega Saturn Core, because I believe the last time we tested this, it did not do anything whatsoever. So it's a fun time to see new games come to the core, and definitely, even if it is interlaced, it is an awesome game to check out. Now, another game mentioned in the GitHub patch notes is going to be Hang On GP, and while again this may not be your favorite Sega Saturn game, it is definitely an improved one outside of the controls, which seem to be doing some very strange things as far as how they're configured in. And if you do notice that texture is kind of rolling off and warping at the edge, it seems like it's a little bit stronger than real hardware, but I did put my copy of this game on my PVM on my real hardware, and it definitely likes to roll the texture off as well. It seems to be maybe 10 to 15% more dramatic here, but it could just be that my CRT television actually hides a little bit of that on the overscan, and I might not just be seeing the totality of what actually happens. But this is another game that is working now. It's got some great graphics to it. It's got some fun rotation effects. It's just right now that the controls seem to be a little bit out of hand, and that has been seen in a couple other games before on the Saturn Core. You can play around with the different control types in the game in and of itself, and you can play around with different control types within the on-screen display on the actual core. But unfortunately, that doesn't really seem to fix what the control issues are in the game, so it might just need some more code work. There might be a little bug in here, but it seems like whatever happens, the thing is just set to pure digital, and pushing any cardinal direction just forces that bike to turn as hard as it possibly can, which is a very strange thing. I did check this out on original hardware with a D-pad and digital inputs, and while it's not the best racing game ever as far as controls are concerned with digital input, it definitely wasn't as dramatic as you're seeing here. But that's totally fine. These improvements come in waves, and they definitely take some time to get in there. But as far as the actual graphical performance is concerned, this is extremely close to what real hardware is doing. And again, with that little bit of texture warping and polygon warping at the bottom of the screens, that is something you'll see on real hardware as well. I could probably just throw my Saturn onto my RetroTink and do a capture in the future to see if it's different or if it is just the overscan hiding it. But if you want to check this game out today, you totally can. And if you've had luck with the steering better than you're seeing here, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you did, because I would be very curious. But moving on to the other Proteus game on the deluxe pack, again, it's another title that is working, and working so much better than the last time we took a look at this. The sound is definitely improved, because I think the last time we actually checked this game out, the sound was missing or very distorted. Now everything looks, feels, plays, and sounds exactly like you'd expect out of original hardware. And again, if it wasn't that on the last video, I can't remember. I think I've done like 40 of these. But go ahead and listen to the sound, and I'll be right back. Now, I've heard that soundtrack, all of those sound effects, very many times across Saturn arcade boards and otherwise, and this sounds absolutely like it should. And that is the great thing about the Core. In spots, the sound is definitely improving. You might still hit a game that doesn't have the music playing in the background, and you might still hit some games where the audio level is too low, but that was not boosted in Resolve whatsoever. That was the source coming out of a capture card, and I would say that that sounds exactly like my original Saturn hardware would as well, both on the volume front as well as the quality front. And of course, this game is just an absolute 10 out of 10 amazing experience, and it seems like it's just 100% playable here on the current Sega Saturn Core. You are spoiled for shmups on the Sega Saturn. We have more shmups working on this core, and it seems like the large majority of shmups on the Saturn in and of itself are working perfectly fine now on the current core. So if you are a shmup player, you're a fan, or you want to get into the genre, you can definitely start doing that on the Sega Saturn Core today. And before you ask me down below, this is not an update all yet. You have to go over to the MiSTer Discord, go under Unstable Nightlies, and download the most recent Sega Saturn Core. There should be a dual RAM version as well as a single RAM version. So just remember that if you're just using update all, what you're seeing here is not accomplishable on your current installation. Now, last video I promised you I would talk about Cube Battler more. I previewed it a little bit and teased it, and now you can take a look at the FMV intro cut sequence, and we'll get to some gameplay in a little bit. But this, of all the Sega Saturn games, might be one of the most confusing to me. If you've never played Battle Heat on the PCFX, and I don't really recommend anybody do so outside of the curiosity, this might not make a lot of sense, but this is a game that was improved per the patch notes on GitHub, and I'm sure that's down to the rotational effects on some of the sprites when you actually get into a quote-unquote fight in the game. It's got some awesome anime FMV cut sequences though, and it's got a lot of interest and intrigue. You're really curious what's going on in the world of Cube Battler, but when you actually get into the gameplay, you're going to be absolutely fundamentally confused just as to what the hell you're supposed to actually do when you start playing the game. But it is very interesting, and it does seem to be a little bit of an evolution of that Battle Heat kind of gameplay mechanic. You get cubes, you need to place them somewhere, and those are going to designate the attacks you use in the game. How does that work? Why does it do it? I have absolutely no idea. This is something that you could probably look up on GameFAQs to get some controller guides on, but it is just one of those Sega Saturn curiosities, and with a library as deep as the Sega Saturn, there's definitely going to be a lot of games that you're just not sure what you're supposed to do or why they exist in the first place. This is like half a puzzle game married to half of a fighting game married to another half, and I know that's 150%. My math here is always right. Game like Battle Heat. I'm not sure why it exists, but it is a fun time, and again, it's got some awesome cutscenes that are definitely worth looking at. But if you've ever played Cube Battler, if you ever know what's supposed to be done here, leave me a comment down below, because I would be curious to know more about why this game is here, why it is improved, and most importantly, why this exists in the first place. It's a real strange title, but I'm sure there's somebody out there watching now or on the internet somewhere, it's their favorite game, and they can explain to me and everybody else exactly what you're supposed to be doing in the world of this game. But honestly, it's improved, and that's all we care about. And that is the current slate of improvements on the Sega Saturn Core. There's one baseball game that was improved as well, but I'm holding that to the next video so we don't get into the like 17-18 minute mark. But if you haven't updated your Sega Saturn Core recently, go over to MiSTer Discord, grab the Unstable Nightly build, pop it on your SD card, and you'll be off playing the most recent version of the Sega Saturn. If you have any retesting requests, if you want to see old games tested again, leave me a comment down below. But short of that, Saturn's getting better. We're done here, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.